Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something absolutely fascinating. We're going to completely demystify the complex biological hardware of our minds. You can basically think of this as the anatomical user manual for the human brain. We are breaking down exactly what's inside your head, how it actually functions, and most importantly, how you can optimize it. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover animal versus human brains, gray and white matter, motivation and habits, the biological reality of anxiety, high achiever frameworks, and finally, neuroplasticity. All right, let's dive right into Section 1, Animal versus Human Brains, focusing on our evolutionary foundations. Okay, think about this for a second. If you were to take the outer layer, the cortex, off a smooth rat's brain and just flatten it all out, it would be roughly the size of a small pre-bred. Pretty tiny, right? But a human cortex is incredibly folded with these deep grooves that neuroscientists call gyri and sulci. If you flattened ours out, it's literally the size of a large pizza. Evolution basically had to crumple and fold all that extra tissue up just so it could physically fit inside our skulls. It's honestly a lot like a giant Lego box. Whether you're looking at the brain of a goat, a mouse, a rat, or, a human being, the baseline neuronal circuitry is built from the exact same identical biological blocks. The hardware is the same. We humans just have those blocks arranged in much, much more complex networks. Moving right along to Section 2, Gray and White Matter. Let's look at the internal structures. You've definitely heard the phrase, use your gray matter, right? Well, here is what that actually means. Gray matter consists of your physical cells and neurons. If you zoom in and look at them under a microscope, they look almost exactly like a dense forest of trees with all these branches reaching out. These are the literal signal producers of your mind. So when you make a really tough decision or recall a favorite childhood memory or come up with a brilliant new idea, that action is fundamentally born right there in your gray matter. But if gray matter is the factory actually producing the signals, white matter is basically your brain's high-speed internet cable. It's made up of these long fiber bundles, and it carries those generated signals across vast distances inside your head. It connects different parts of the brain together and fires commands all the way down your spinal cord out to your limbs. Now for Section 3, Motivation, Habits, and Addiction. This is all about survival and reward. So where does motivation physically live in your biology? It actually follows a very specific physical path. Deep down in the base of your brain, the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, generates dopamine. That signal then shoots up to the nucleus accumbens, and finally, it hits your prefrontal cortex, where the reward is actually processed. This is an ancient survival circuit. It's the exact same wiring that makes you feel motivated to grab a glass of water when you're thirsty. Here's the catch, though. It is absolutely crucial to understand how easily the system gets disrupted. See, natural rewards, like eating food or socializing with friends, give us a baseline dopamine hit. That's totally normal and essential for survival. But hijacked rewards, things like addictive substances, excessive sugar, or even just endlessly scrolling on your phone, they completely overload the dopamine gain. You flood the system, your brain builds up a tolerance, and suddenly, you need way more of that stimulus just to feel a baseline level of normal. Take alcohol, for example. A lot of people think of it as a stimulant because of that initial social high, but biologically, it is actually a central nervous system depressant. And over time, chronic exposure to it literally shrinks the hippocampus, which is this little seahorse-shaped structure responsible for your learning and your explicit memories. It also shrinks the prefrontal cortex, so the physical brain structures that literally make you who you are actually begin to wither away. Which brings us to Section 4, the biological reality of anxiety and our internal threat detection system. Have you ever asked yourself this? Why does your body suddenly react like there is a hungry tiger in the room when you're just sitting completely safely at your desk? It's a wild feeling. Well, the biological truth is that anxiety is actually your survival system firing perfectly. It's just firing in the entirely wrong context. Chronic social stress literally tells your ancient brain that you are in immediate physical danger. Let's walk through this exact biological chain reaction. When you perceive a threat, and that could be a toxic boss or getting ostracized on social media, your hypothalamus immediately activates. It tells your pituitary gland to send a distress signal down to your adrenal glands, which then dump massive amounts of cortisol and adrenaline into your system. Your heart rate instantly spikes to pump glucose to your muscles, and non-essential systems like digestion and reproduction just totally shut down. A social media snub literally creates the exact same cascading physical response as running for your life from a predator. Your body simply doesn't know the difference. All right, section 5, frameworks of high achievers. Let's look at how the elites optimize this biology. Let's look at Michael Jordan's framework. He was famously obsessed with the process, right? He used intense visualization and endless repetition. By imagining and physically practicing his moves thousands upon thousands of times, he was structurally optimizing his motor cortex. He was relying really heavily on the striatum and the basal ganglia. Through sheer repetition and a genuine love for the process, he built an automatic, procedural muscle memory that just executed perfectly whenever he was under pressure. Then you've got Michael Phelps, who used a completely different framework, something we can call a prefrontal override. Phelps famously used to imagine all the terrible, negative outcomes that could happen during a race, like his goggles suddenly breaking and filling up with water. By visualizing the worst-case scenario, he utilized his highly evolved prefrontal cortex to exert top-down control over his emotional brain. He basically pre-solved the disaster before it even happened. That way, if a crisis actually hit, his brain wouldn't panic. It would just execute a calm, pre-programmed response. And then, on the extreme other end of the spectrum, we have Napoleon's fear framework. Before a battle, he prepared for every single possible way he could die. This is an approach driven entirely by raw survival instincts, operating super heavily out of the amygdala, which is your brain's threat detection center. Now, don't get me wrong, this kept him alive. But operating constantly from a place of intense fear heavily taxes your nervous system. Over time, it causes massive toxic chronic stress. So yeah, it works, but it is without a doubt the least sustainable way to win. Finally, section 6, neuroplasticity, how we go about rewiring your mind. 25. That right there is the magic number for peak neuroplasticity. The first 25 years of your life feature this incredibly malleable nervous system that adapts rapidly to whatever environment you're in. But hey, the fantastic news here is that neuroplasticity doesn't just suddenly switch off the day you turn 26. Your brain actually remains highly adaptable throughout your entire life, but only provided you continue to demand that adaptation by deliberately challenging it to learn difficult, new things. Neuroscientists love to use this brilliant analogy to explain it. They say it's like an interior decorator decorating rooms differently. If you take the brain of a billionaire high achiever and compare it to a total couch potato, the architectural blueprint is exactly the same. The biological building blocks are identical, but your daily habits, your challenges, and your life experiences, those act as the interior decorators, physically changing the strength of the connections inside your head. You literally decorate your own mind. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. If your brain is constantly, and I mean constantly, rewiring itself based on your daily actions, what exactly are you choosing? Are you choosing the comfort of a hijacked habit, scrolling endlessly and flooding your circuits with cheap dopamine? Or are you choosing the challenge of learning something hard, building real discipline, and stepping fully into the elite potential of your biological hardware? The power to rewire your mind is quite literally in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.